IVM.
So welcome to another week on IVM. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This week on Simplified in a Shorty, Naren and Shrikit simplify the phenomena of near-death experiences with interesting cases and scientific theories. On Pragati, Pawan and Hamsani are joined by economic policy expert Yazad Jal to discuss negative and positive rights. On the Scene and the Unseen, Amit Verma is joined by stand-up comedian Aditi Mittal and our production controller Swati to discuss misogyny and popular culture. On Pulyabazi, Saurabh and Pranay speak to Shruti Rajgopalan about the meaning and importance of property rights in India. This week on Shunya One, we have Suchita Salwan, founder and CEO of LBP, a local recommendations platform striving to discover all things new and old. On Hustle Science, Ranveer and Tejaswan speak to their buddy, tech entrepreneur and founder of Hello Inc., Angad Nadkarni, to understand his coding craze and a lot more about his stories. And now, on to your shows.
Hi, Zain.
Hi, Avanti.
When was the last time you cried?
Either yesterday or day before.
Well, that's super unusual for a guy.
Yeah, I suppose so. By the way, hi everyone. I'm Zain.
I'm Avanti.
And welcome to this episode of Marbles Lost and Found. We are a podcast aiming to raise awareness about mental health and its importance in our day-to-day lives. Just keep in mind that we are not a perfect substitute for it. We are just here to have a conversation and just get more people to talk about it.
Yeah, and today's conversation is titled Big Boys Don't Cry.
Apparently, yeah.
Except Zain.
Yeah, except me. Yeah, I'm the anomaly from the looks of it.
Yeah. But really, though, I think we were both pretty intrigued by this topic. You actually brought it up. You were like, I find it just that you're just intrigued by the fact that men just don't talk about feelings. They don't acknowledge feelings, their own feelings, and they don't talk about them.
Yeah, they typically don't. To expand on that, I feel like it's only over the past couple of years that I've really just started to, for lack of a better word, own my emotions and really just start, talking about shit that has been going on with me. Because before that, I just didn't really know how at all. And there were points where I remember when I was younger, like a teenager, maybe late teens, early 20s, where I was trying to figure out, how to talk about certain things that were bugging me. And I turned to a couple of guys, and with a lot of effort, I turned to these guys and I asked them about, I was just feeling really low about this. I remember once when I was in high school, I was dealing with a breakup that I just wasn't taking well at all. And a lot of the advice was just like, man, just chill, just get yourself distracted in some way, go play basketball. We played a lot of basketball in school. Just continue playing your music.
Date someone else,
find someone else, get someone else.
Yeah.
And that was basically the kind of, road that I went down ever since I started to deal with, shall we say, negative emotions.
And it's not just you, right? I think as a culture in general, in India, we're taught from a really young age that there's basically two emotions, right? We can feel and express.
Which ones are those?
Anger and joy.
Anger and joy. Well, yeah, if you look at the streets of Bombay, I think anger is the most prominent emotion that you'll see. Yeah, for sure.
And the stuff in between anger and joy, the vulnerable stuff that no one likes to feel. Sadness, guilt, disappointment, loneliness, hurt. We aren't actually even taught to identify that. That actually, hey, you know what? This isn't anger. I'm actually just really, really disappointed.
Right. In fact, I actually wanted to ask you something about that because, it's a very different, unfortunately, it's a very different paradigm for men because I can't tell you the number of times I've heard the phrase, man up, be a man. Men aren't supposed to be vulnerable, Up until the last couple of years when I started to figure out things about myself, I couldn't tell you the last time I cried before that. I really couldn't. And I just used to keep it all in. But I want to know as well, from a perspective of a woman, what is it like? Are you also kind of taught that, there's only a certain of emotions that you need to feel, or you can feel a myriad of emotions? It's just that when a guy feels those, he's quote-unquote being a woman. How is it for you?
That's a really good question because my instinct, or rather my knee-jerk reaction, is to be like, oh no, women are, we're allowed to feel all the emotions. But actually, if I take a step back and I look at myself, my clients, my friends, my family, And I think that as a child, we are, young girls, we're allowed to feel sad. We're allowed to cry. But we're also very quickly told to chill out. Like, if an emotion gets too quote unquote, too intense, if a girl is too much,
right,
too hysterical and too clingy and too hurt, and she gets too lonely and too upset about something, too disappointed, then that's not allowed either.
I see.
And in fact, I would even go a step further to say that when I was growing up, I don't think I allowed myself to feel vulnerable emotions, because that was immediately clumped in the category of she's too much.
Right.
She's too much of a girl. Like, she's being too whiny, or like she needs too many things.
Right.
So I took on a lot more quote unquote like masculine expression traits, like where I would quickly resort to anger.
Right.
As opposed to be like, I'm actually hurt or whatever.
Yeah.
And I see that with a lot of my friends, and it's been a lot of years of unlearning those defenses and being like, it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a cultural thing, as opposed, I understand that for men, even as you grow up, you aren't taught or allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Women somehow, I guess, sometimes have to.
I remember a couple of years ago, I went for a program, it was a sort of like a self-development program. And a lot of the course involved people really not only allowing themselves to feel vulnerable, but they had to really force themselves to feel vulnerable, because that was part of the curriculum. And I remember there was, I think, at least 100 odd of us. And I remember the ratio was about, I'd say 50-50 or maybe 60-40 in favor of men. But I will say this, that a lot of the men who were asked to come up, or even the men who voluntarily came up to speak, it was clear that something was bugging them. They just had no idea how to say it. I don't know, maybe were sometimes even taught not even have the vocabulary sometimes to express how we're feeling sometimes. Yeah. And I've seen friends of mine, or even, older men, so of an older generation. I think people of an older generation, they're like, yeah, we never had all this depression, whatever, in our time. We just dealt with it. But then you just see this barrage of people just angry all the time.
And then f***ing up their kids.
Yeah.
Because that's what they teach them to be.
They're so resentful of something or someone, and they're so angry all the time, and they're very temperamental. And that is just on them all the time. And the thing is that because they've held on to it for such a long time, it's like, I know someone who wears their scars as some sort of like a badge of honor. Like, yeah, this is all my shit. I hold on to it because I know how to handle it. And the things that if you've been holding on to that shit for over 30, 40 years, and I've spoken to this person about, the stuff that has bothered them through all this time, but still not gotten into the details, and they'll still say, you know what, this is all I'm going to tell you. I'll handle all the other stuff on my own.
But they don't handle it.
They don't.
They don't actually know how.
Yeah, they don't know how. And the things that they don't let it out because they've held onto it for so long, the next question is, what is there if that's not there?
Right. So do men who want to share even know how? How to?
It took me a while, at least. I think.
Tell me your story.
So, I think for me, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, I realized in hindsight that I've been dealing with depression ever since I was like 15 or 16, but I just didn't really know what it was. I think it came to a point where I hit some sort of emotional rock bottom.
How old were you then?
This was 2016.
Oh, so
actually.
Really recent. So 10 years after you...
10 years recent. Yeah, 10 years after, or 11 years after. I was going through a really, really bad time with work. Still trying to, figure it out. The hustle is real in this scene as a freelancer, as a freelance musician, music producer, and still not sure where I was going, what the point of all of it was. And then suddenly I found myself in the middle of a really, really bad breakup after one of my first long-term relationships. And then all of a sudden everything just came crumbling. And I was like, well, what the am I doing with myself? But I still distinctly remember, compared to my first breakup that I mentioned back when I was 15, I still remember back then when that happened, my clear response was, you know what, I'm going to be a man's man. I'm going to just mess around. I'm not going to get into relationships anymore. I'm going to do what a guy is supposed to be doing. And I had everyone's basically at arm's length ever since then. This time when it happened, though, it could have been worse. I could have closed off even more, or I could have just opened up. I don't know why, but I'm glad this time I just chose to open up. And that was the genesis for me actually learning how I can actually deal with my emotions and then talk to people about stuff.
But how did you actually open up? What was the first thing when you felt that urge to be like, I cannot cope. I don't know how to deal with these feelings. I don't even know what these feelings are. How did you choose to open up in that moment?
I remember, I think one of the first times where I was exposed to, feeling very vulnerable was when my girlfriend then and I were still together. And this was just like a day after work where I felt so jaded and the depression was so heavy where I just, like my head felt so numb that it felt just like a migraine. That's how out of it I was. I was like, I don't give a shit about anything. I don't care about going to work tomorrow. I don't care about whether I go to sleep tonight or whatever. I was just in that space. And I never really shared with anyone. And my girlfriend at the time, she messaged me when I got home and she said, hey, how's it going? I said, I'm just not feeling great. And she said, do you want me to come over? I said, no, it's fine. I'll deal with it. Not because I didn't want her to come over, because I didn't even know it was an option to ask her to come over.
And you thought you could just deal with whatever it was on your own.
And she was surprised. And she's like, what do you mean, like, you'll deal with it on your own? I'm your girlfriend. It's my job to kind of help you feel better. This sounds weird to say, but I was actually kind of weirded out by that sentiment. I was like, really? I thought I was just supposed to deal with this shit on my own.
You thought relationships were like just for the good stuff.
Yeah. And she even told her mom about it. And she's like, obviously you need to go. So I was like, okay, fine. And then she came over and I think, so that evening she just came, she gave me a hug and I just wept uncontrollably for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I just wept. I didn't say anything. She just held on to me and that was all I did. I just cried.
Do you find that it's easier to converse with women about emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. I've thought about this a lot and in a way it kind of makes me sad. Sometimes I wonder whether it's still all in my head or whether, when I say it's all in my head, I mean like these ideas that I can't talk to guys as opposed to women. I realize that in fact a lot of my closest friends are women. I have spoken to guys about certain things, but I still feel I need to put in a bit more effort to mention those things to my guy friends as opposed to girlfriends.
But you have spoken to some guy friends.
I have, but again, like I feel it's so much things that I would probably mention off the cuff or just like in passing, say with you or anyone else that I'd consider very close to. I almost find myself second guessing if I were to mention that to a guy. And every time I do mention it, I feel like that's a triumph of some sort. And I mean, I think we're all kind of growing up and we're getting a little bit more, in touch with how things work, but it's still so deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
Like, I still think, you know what, I'm still getting slightly judged here.
Yeah. Like, judged that you're a pussy, that you're a sissy?
Yeah, maybe.
That you're a crybaby?
Quite possibly. I mean, I know that, thankfully, even though I've spoken to, a couple of guys about certain things, some of them, in turn, have also spoken to me about stuff they've been dealing with. And which is great.
Yeah.
And it's really, empowering to have that happen, where people that, you just saw as just a friend, you then share something a lot more personal than that, and that's incredible. But at the same time, I'm not sure if any of them have allowed themselves to be completely vulnerable either. And I'm not saying that has anything to do with me. I'm just saying that that's how we're taught.
Yeah. And I mean, can you imagine we have all these men, 20 plus or 15 plus or 3 plus males in India just walking around with this big, huge like backpack of feelings that they don't know what it is, they don't know how to process it, they don't know who to talk to.
Yeah.
It's gotta have an effect on your mental health. I mean, this is stating the obvious, but what was it like for you for 10 years while you were carrying that backpack of whatever judgment or,
Oh man, I just thought it was normal. And in fact, in a lot of ways, I still do. The feelings that I have, I basically have 24/7. I have a clenching feeling right in my chest. It's there always. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Even when I'm happy, fine, it may have gone down, but then within a few minutes it comes back. To me, I was like, well, I guess this is just how everybody feels. And sometimes when things get really intense, it becomes more intense where I sometimes can't cope. But that's basically how it feels all the time for me. And the thing is that I'm so used to it now that honestly, there's a part of me that wonders what will happen if it does go at all. And I've been trying for as long as, I guess, 2 years now to try and get rid of it in a more, I guess, informed way rather than why am I so pissed off all the time or why am I sad all the time. It doesn't.
Yeah, it takes... Yeah, it's hard work.
It's hard, yeah.
But like you seem to have asked yourself those questions. You thought it was worthwhile to introspect and be like, wait, why am I pissed off all the time?
Maybe.
Or what is going on with me? I mean, all these guys who are just like walking around being pissed off and reactionary to things and who haven't actually bothered taking a step back and thinking, what is going on here? Like, this can't be how everyone else feels.
Yeah.
I really worry sometimes. Like, I know how you said that it's normal. Like, for you, it was normal. You thought it was normal, and this is just how life is. I don't know. There's something about that just makes me really sad.
It is. It is sad. Yeah. I guess there is a better way of dealing with this sort of thing. I've started to figure that out on my own a little bit more. And what's interesting is that a friend of mine put me onto this web series some time ago. It's called We Are Man Enough. Anyone who's listening might just want to Google it. I found it quite interesting. I know, Avanti, you didn't, though, but we'll get to that.
I didn't give it enough of a chance.
Yeah. So, well, the thing is that the first episode is titled Why Don't Men Talk? And what I liked about this is that you had, it was a round table of different men from different walks of life, different ethnicities, different age groups. And they were just, talking about how the idea of toxic masculinity has just not allowed them to express themselves the way they want to, has limited them from relationships that they may have been in, be it with, loved, be it with parents, family, spouses, that sort of thing, and how they just may have constantly felt, inadequate or angry and basically all of the above. So for me as a guy, it really resonated with me that at least there was this sort of forum where guys from different backgrounds were talking about this sort of thing, different sexual orientations, all of that. But what was it? So that was interesting to me. There's a bunch of different episodes that they have on there that sort of explore the role of men in society today and how it's and how gender roles, the lines of gender roles are starting to blur now.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting.
Yeah. Wait, before we get into that though, I'm quite curious about, we've been talking about you and expectations of masculinity and, and in your relationships, that you've had, your romantic relationships or whatever, have you noticed that there is a stereotype of logical man and emotive woman and that it is a familiar trope that just keeps getting thrown about?
Maybe, and not in my most recent relationship, but perhaps the one before that, before I was a little bit more in touch with myself, a little bit more aware of how I was feeling. I think, again, like I said, I told my girlfriend at the time, what, you don't need to come over, I'll just deal. And she's like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah. So I was in that sort of frame of mind more often than not. It just after that is when I started to get a little bit more, and she was a lot more expressive than I was. I could only go so far until I felt that I was prodding myself, and then I started to get, and when I started to get more emotional, at least for me, I realized when she and I were, say, not arguing, but debating something, my defense system went off, and it just kind of manifested itself with anger. I didn't say or do anything that was out of line, but I just kind of felt, let's just drop this topic now. That's how I felt. That's just how I dealt with stuff.
Yeah.
So let me relay the same question to you, Avanti. What is it like with you in your relationships when you're dealing with your emotions?
I think very similar in that I am quite expressive, I think. And I'd hate to be someone who sticks to stereotypes, but I do think women have... I hate saying this, actually. Okay, let's stick to me. I find it easy to express feelings and thoughts and emotion through words.
Okay.
And I like to get that back from my partner. And I think a lot of women are like that.
Right.
At least what I've experienced. I just looked at our producer, who's a woman, and I just expected her to agree with me.
But have you been able to get that sort of response that you wanted from your partner?
I think it's been really interesting because I think in the beginning there was a definite difference, huge gap in the way that we communicated with each other. And I think, men need to be trained because of what we're talking about, which is that it takes a while. Like, men aren't taught to be expressive even if they're feeling certain things.
Right.
But eventually, you rub off on each other, and one of you doesn't need that much expression anymore, and the other learns to kind of meet you halfway. So yeah, but it definitely was a stereotype, like in my relationship too, and in several that I've seen, where the man is the stoic, and the woman is the...
God bless gender roles and how shitty they are.
Seriously.
And I think on that note, we've kind of covered a lot of the stuff that we wanted to talk about. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you want to get in touch with us, if you want to send us your stories, things that resonated with you, as far as, what you heard today, you can write to us at write2marbles@gmail.com. That's WRITETOMARBLES@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Facebook as well. Catch Marbles Lost and Found every week on the IVM app, website, or anywhere you get your podcasts from. And thank you all for listening today. I've been Zain and Avanti. See ya.
Bye.
Every week comes a show where three people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on the IVM Podcast app to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
Hello there, my name is Naveen Narona, and as a gay person in India, I get asked a lot of stupid questions.
Beta, is it LGBT or eligibility?
How do two men procreate?
Bro, is Grindr better than Tinder or what?
We answer all these questions and much more on my podcast, Keeping It Queer, where I talk to individuals from the LGBT community in India and learn about their personal stories. Catch all the episodes on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app you like. Till then, keep it queer.